I think it varies from child to child, but I think specifically for our young boys, they need that male strong role model to show them how to be a strong male. I think with the girls that sometimes maybe they end up taking relationships less seriously because they don't know what a solid relationship looks like if there's not one in the household. So I do think it takes effect, but it affects each child differently. I don't think that I see any more violence than others. I think kids in general play harder and pick harder than they used to. I do think that bullying is on the rise, and it's something that we have a zero tolerance policy for here. But we see instances of kids leaning towards that nature very early at young ages, like kindergarten. And I don't know if that's an attention grabbing element. I don't know if they're doing it because they feel like it shows their strength. I'm not sure if it's because they just simply don't have enough discipline. I don't think that the amount of discipline is varied by single versus dual parent households. But I do think that often parents are working so many hours and they rely on their care to other people, whether it's after school programs or family members, that it's confusing for a child to know who to follow if their parenting skills aren't the same or their skills aren't the same. I think boys interact more favorably with boys when they've had enough opportunity to be around them. When you've got a boy, we have a situation where we have one young man who was raised with all sisters, 4 or 5 sisters, and he tends to be a little gentler spoken, but when he gets around the boys, he wants to be just like them. So he's going to lean towards the one who gets the most attention, and it doesn't necessarily mean good attention. On the other side, I have a young lady who is a member of there's 10 kids in the family. She is the only girl out of 10 children, and she's next to the youngest. So she tends to act a little tougher because that's what she knows. And she does tend to be tougher with the other girls. Like the way she behaves is more like a tomboy as opposed to the other girls who are trying to be really feminine and makeup and nails and all that kind of stuff. So I think it just matters what they're raised around. At the end of last year, we did a study, and at that point, 74% of our families were single parent households.
Okay.
Well, I think that, if you look at national statistics, single parent households are to blame or being blamed for high rising crimes or juvenile delinquency or lack of school dropout rates in some areas. In our area, studies show that we have more single family households than we do dual family households, and our dropout rate is no higher than the national average. I think that we have so many other socioeconomic factors that play into it that it may be harder for a single parent, but the challenges are pretty much the same for everybody. When you've got 2 sets of income, for example, in a household, it sounds like it's going to be better because you've got 2 incomes coming in. However, you also have more responsibility for insurance. You get less help in things like child care vouchers and food stamps. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I think that when you look at like our shelter, we have the only women in family shelter in High Point. So if you wanted to look at the statistics based on how many women come through our shelter versus how many men go through the men's shelter, the women's is probably going to be higher. However, and they're going to be single family in that situation most of the time, single parent. But I think that may speak more to the fact that women are willing to seek help where men aren't. If a man comes into our shelter, it's because he has children. And as a single father, I think sometimes they're forgotten a little bit, that they have those same needs, but they're not necessarily willing to ask for help. So it's kind of hard to gauge. I think our families here, our kids are great. I mean, we have some great parents. They might be just one in the household, but they're doing such a great job and they're working really hard to make sure their kids get the best, that it's kind of hard for me to gauge that question. Well, the biggest impact on the males with an absent father is, like I said, a strong male role model. They need someone to model after. Kids are going to follow the path of least resistance. What becomes their normal is what's going to be their normal for how they raise their children. So if there's not a man around, they may not see the importance of being around for their children. So that's my biggest concern, is raising our young men to be young men. And as hard as a mom can teach that, and as great a mom as she could be, it's just difficult for them to compare what their mothers did for them with the strength of what a father should be doing for them. But by the same token, it's the same thing when a female is absent. We have a lot of single fathers out there. So when you've got a single father who's missing, girls go through certain parts of their lives, they need their moms. And there's no way a man can even comprehend certain parts of their lives and help walk them through those female things. So they're going to have to reach out to an aunt or a close family friend or somebody that's female to help kind of walk them through those moments that they may not be willing to talk to their dads even about. Mm-hmm. So I think it affects both differently. I think when a girl is missing her father, that her relationships are built on what that looked like for her, and that she may not have a lot of support. She may not have a lot of confidence when it comes to men. She may expect him to leave her, so she doesn't, get attached easily, or she, there's a lot of psychological ways it can harm a girl for her dad not to show her what a man's supposed to look like. And I think for boys who don't have their mothers around, it's the same thing. I think that they're missing a softer side. And if you look at a lot of young men and how well they treat their women, it's based on how well they respected their mother and how they saw their mom treated by their father. So I think it takes two to have that whole balance. Not necessarily a biological father, though. I mean, I've seen a lot of step parents step in and be better parents than the biological one could ever be. So these blended families work. Well, I think it depends on what their confidence and trust level is. We have kids that come in here, and our staff is trained, and we take a lot of pride in the fact that we try to step into those roles that are missing in their lives. So we try to identify, what role is missing. If we know it's a child whose father's not in the picture, then our males will step in with those boys and try to help them. Things like hygiene, grooming, politeness. We're teaching etiquette because we think that all children need to learn how to behave themselves in public and do it in a manner that's fitting a public place, but that only comes from somebody they respect. So if there's not a guy at home that's teaching the boys, hey man, pull your pants up, or wear a belt, or it's disrespectful to have your underwear showing, or open a door for a young lady, if they don't see it, they don't know to do it. So we step in and try to do things like that. So outside influences would be any contact these kids have at church, their after school programs, their teachers in their schools, their coaches within their little leagues and sports. They all have the ability to step into those roles and help mold the kids for whatever's missing. They can positively impact or fill the gap of what's missing. When we see a child that comes in here that potentially, I'm trying to think of a good example, for example, a little boy that'll hit a little girl. That's a little boy who hasn't been taught you don't hit girls. That's a little boy that doesn't know the difference because the only role model he has is his mom or his older sister or somebody like that. So when you bring a male in, like one of our staff members, they're talking to him about, hey man, it's not cool to hit a girl. It's not cool to hit anybody, but specifically how you handle females, opening the doors, being polite. Little boys aren't going to come to me and ask me about showering habits or when do I start using deodorant or any of those things, but they don't have a man to show them that. Our outside males can step in and certainly help them and mentor them to make good life decisions. They need to see somebody strong. Not necessarily. I think that women tend to offer more patience and a softer approach to most things. And I think that every child needs that in their lives. However, I don't think that it's any stronger than what a male can teach when it comes to patience, if it's there, or strength, or independence, or just, I think a man can be just as nurturing as a female. But I think that the male role model should teach boys how to respect women. And if they respect their mom, they're going to respect their women as they get older. But if they don't have that respect, or they haven't seen a man treat a woman that way, that's where I'm afraid that the generational gap starts happening, and you see abuse or you see mistreatment because they don't know how to treat each other. That's the biggest influence I think a woman has on especially little boys, is teaching them how to respect women. But when it comes to girls, I just think there's certain skills you can't learn unless you see it done. And having your mom in your household, I look back at having my mother. I was very blessed to have my mom in my life. She taught me to cook. She taught me how to do some domesticated things. And I'm not saying a man can't teach those things, but it's something about that softer, gentler side that girls need to learn. And it's hard to learn if you don't have a woman around. Now, my stepdaughter didn't have her mother around. She's a little tougher and rougher around the edges than most. But I will say that she is far more independent and far more go-getter because of who her dad is, because she had a strong dad. So you not having her mom there didn't diminish her strength. It actually probably strengthened her, because she had to kind of do some things on her own. But at the same time, she did have one strong parent. And so I think as long as you got one strong parent, you can get through the rest of it.